The vast, unforgiving plains of the American West stretched out under a sky that promised both beauty and brutality, a canvas of endless horizon meeting endless possibility. For Sarah, however, the possibilities felt grim. She was a young woman, whose spirit was as fiery as the prairie sun, yet whose face and hands bore the cruel marks of a childhood fire, a constant physical reminder of a past tragedy. She arrived in the dusty frontier town, a nameless speck in a world that valued unblemished beauty and robust strength, with nothing but a tattered dress and the crushing weight of countless rejections. Each averted gaze, each hushed whisper that followed her like a shadow, made her feel more alone than she ever thought possible. The isolation of physical ache in her chest, her desperate search for work, or even just a moment of human kindness was met with the same cold, unwelcoming reception. Saloon doors remained shut, shopkeepers turned their backs, and the women of the town clutched their children closer as she passed. The sting of their judgment was more painful than any physical wound, a constant reminder of how superficial the world could be, how quickly appearances overshadowed character. The harsh winds that whipped dust into her eyes mirrored the sting of her emotional pain, a relentless assault on her already fragile hope. She found herself sitting on a worn bench outside the general store, watching the bustle of the town and feeling utterly invisible, a ghost in a land of the living, wondering if she was destined to forever roam, unwanted and alone. Every creak of a wagon wheel, every distant gunshot seemed to emphasize the vastness of her solitude. She yearned for a place, a purpose, a connection that transcended the surface. Her hands, though scarred, were strong and capable, longing to contribute, to build, to mend. Yet, the fear in people's eyes, the quick glances away, extinguished any spark of opportunity before it could truly ignite. The sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in fiery hues that ironically reminded her of the fire that had irrevocably altered her life, casting long, lonely shadows that seemed to stretch indefinitely before her. The weight of her existence felt heavy, a burden she carried alone in a world that offered little comfort. As dusk settled, a chill permeated the air, a physical manifestation of the coldness she felt from the world around her. She wrapped her arms around herself, not just against the biting wind, but against the despair that threatened to consume her. Her stomach growled, a dull ache, reminding her of the immediate desperate need for survival. She knew she couldn't stay in this town, not when every glance was a judgment, every silence a condemnation. But where would she go? The endless prairie offered no answers, only more questions that echoed in the vast, empty spaces of her heart. She closed her eyes, willing away the tears, and tried to summon the resilience that had carried her this far, knowing that somehow she had to keep going. In the same dusty frontier town, though seemingly worlds apart from Sarah's silent suffering, Elias was a grizzled rancher whose eyes held the weariness of a man who'd lost too much. The lines etched around his eyes spoke of sun-baked days and star-filled nights spent in quiet solitude. His wife, gone 5 years now, had taken with her not just his companion, but a piece of his very soul, leaving his heart a desolate landscape. Much like the land he toiled on, his hopes for a prosperous future had withered like crops in a drought, and his ranch, once a thriving testament to his hard work, was now a constant battle against the elements and the looming threat of foreclosure. He was in town for supplies, his thoughts consumed by the desperate math of survival, the ounces of flour and pounds of nails weighing heavily against his dwindling savings. As he emerged from the general store, a sack of feed slung over his shoulder. His gaze, usually fixed on the ground or the horizon, happened to fall upon Sarah. He observed her from afar, a silent sentinel witnessing the casual cruelty she endured. He saw the averted eyes, heard the hushed whispers that carried on the wind, and watched as a group of children, mimicking their parents, pointed and giggled before being quickly pulled away. Unlike others, his gaze lingered not on her scars, which he certainly noticed, but on the quiet strength he perceived in her posture, the defiant lift of her chin despite the visible pain in her eyes. It was a strength he recognized, a resilience that resonated with his own battle-hardened spirit, a flicker of compassion ignited within him, a feeling he thought long dead, buried deep beneath layers of grief and solitude. He remembered his own profound loneliness, the ache of an empty house and an empty heart, and saw a reflection of it in her isolated figure. In that moment, a strange impulse, driven by his own aching need for companionship and a surprising surge of empathy, took hold. It was an urge to step outside the bounds of convention, to offer something beyond pity. He watched as she gathered her meager belongings, looking utterly lost, and a decision solidified within him with the force of a sudden, undeniable conviction. He strode towards her, his boots kicking up dust, his heart pounding with an unfamiliar blend of apprehension and determination. "Ma'am," he said, his voice a low rumble, startling her. Her head snapped up, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and surprise. "I need a wife," he continued, cutting straight to the point, his gaze steady, unwavering, "and you need a place. We could help each other." The words hung in the air between them, bold and unexpected. He saw the shock, then the flicker of a desperate hope in her eyes, and knew that in this wild, untamed land, sometimes the most improbable solutions were the only ones that made any sense. "I'll marry you today," he added, his voice firm, leaving no room for hesitation, as he extended a hand towards her, a lifeline in a sea of despair. The decision was made with the speed of a prairie fire, fueled by desperation on one side and an almost reckless compassion on the other. Sarah, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs, saw not just a chance for survival, but a shred of dignity, a reprieve from the endless, soul-crushing rejections. Elias's offer, though abrupt and unconventional, was a stark contrast to the judgment she had faced for so long. She nodded, her voice caught in her throat, unable to articulate the whirlwind of emotions, fear, gratitude, and a sliver of bewildered hope. The hurried wedding took place in the town's small, quiet church, the air thick with unspoken questions and thinly veiled judgment from the handful of curious and skeptical onlookers. Their vows were simple, exchanged quickly, echoing in the nearly empty nave, a solemn pact made by two strangers bound by circumstance. The ride back to Elias's ranch was a silent, tense affair. The sun began its slow descent, painting the vast western sky in hues of orange and purple, a beautiful backdrop to an undeniably awkward journey. The initial awkwardness was palpable, a thick veil between them. Elias focused on the reins, his jaw tight, occasionally glancing at Sarah, who sat stiffly beside him, her gaze fixed on the endless horizon. Neither knew what to say, what to expect. The reality of their impulsive union settled over them like the evening dust, heavy and omnipresent. This wasn't a marriage born of romance, but of necessity, a fragile agreement forged in the harsh crucible of the frontier. Elias's desolate ranch, when they finally arrived, was a stark testament to his loneliness. The small, weather-beaten cabin stood stoically against the elements, surrounded by a few struggling corrals and a barn that leaned precariously. Inside, the cabin was Spartan, filled with the ghosts of a past life. Sarah looked around, her eyes taking in the worn furniture, the lingering scent of stale pipe tobacco, and the general air of neglect. It was a daunting prospect, transforming not just a rundown homestead, but a lonely man's life. Elias, for his part, grappled with his decision, the unfamiliar presence of a woman who carried both physical and emotional wounds now occupying the space that had been empty for far too long. The initial days were a silent dance of two wounded souls, learning to navigate an unexpected shared existence. They moved around each other with careful steps, like two wary animals in a shared territory. Sarah began the arduous task of cleaning and organizing, her capable hands bringing a semblance of order to the chaos. She cooked simple meals over the hearth, and her quiet presence slowly began to fill the empty spaces in the cabin. Elias, in turn, worked the land, observing her with a quiet intensity. He saw her resilience, her unwavering determination, and a grudging respect began to take root. They were two broken pieces, perhaps, but slowly, tentatively, they were beginning to fit together, creating an unlikely but tangible bridge over the chasm of their individual pasts. Life on the ranch was an endless cycle of hard work and new challenges, each day a test of their endurance and their fragile, nascent bond. Sarah, despite her past and her lack of experience in such a harsh environment, proved to be remarkably resilient. She learned to manage the household with an unexpected tenacity, turning the sparse provisions into hearty meals and the dusty cabin into a clean, if humble, home. She even ventured out to help with the ranch work, her small, scarred hands proving surprisingly capable with mending fences and tending to the animals. Elias watched her, a quiet admiration growing in his heart, recognizing a strength in her that went far beyond mere physical stamina. Her presence brought a subtle warmth to the desolate ranch, slowly chipping away at the years of neglect and solitude. However, their newfound connection, born of such unusual circumstances, was not without its formidable obstacles. The small-mindedness of the frontier town was a persistent shadow. Jealousy from other women who had eyed Elias or simply seen Sarah as an outsider who had dared to find a place, spread like wildfire through whispers and pointed looks. Rumors about their hasty marriage, painting Sarah as a desperate opportunist and Elias as a senile fool, reached their ears, sometimes delivered with thinly veiled malice during their infrequent trips to town. Beyond the social scorn, the ever-present financial struggles threatened to tear them apart. A poor harvest, a sick animal, a sudden drop in prices, any of these could mean the loss of the ranch, and with it, their precarious future together. Elias's past demons, too, resurfaced, casting long shadows over their hesitant happiness. Memories of his first wife, the grief that still clung to him, sometimes made him withdrawn, causing moments of doubt and tension between them. Sarah, despite her burgeoning affection for him, sometimes wondered if he saw her only as a convenient solution, a stand-in for the woman he had truly loved. Yet, amidst the hardships and unspoken anxieties, small, precious moments of connection began to blossom. They shared quiet meals under the vast, star-strewn sky, the only sounds the chirping crickets and the soft rustle of the wind. They learned each other's rhythms, their habits, their quiet expressions. A neighboring rancher, Old Man Peterson, a gruff but kind-hearted friend of Elias, offered cautious support, occasionally stopping by with a gift of fresh vegetables or a word of encouragement, his presence a quiet affirmation that not everyone was against them. And then the harsh winter descended, an unforgiving onslaught of snow and biting winds. The extreme weather tested their resolve and forced them to rely on each other in ways they never imagined. Trapped indoors for days, they shared stories, laughter, and the quiet comfort of simple companionship. It was during these long, isolated nights that the superficial layers of their unconventional marriage began to peel away, revealing the tender shoots of genuine affection and respect growing beneath. They slowly started to see beyond each other's surface, recognizing the inherent strength, the quiet resilience, and the deep, unwavering kindness that truly lay beneath. The climax of their burgeoning relationship arrived with the ferocity of a prairie thunderstorm threatening to destroy not only their ranch but the fragile hope they had so carefully cultivated. A severe drought gripped the land, turning the once fertile soil into cracked, dusty earth and threatening to decimate Elias's small herd of cattle, their only source of income. Water holes dried up, grass withered, and the relentless sun beat down with an unyielding intensity. Despair crept into Elias's eyes, a familiar darkness threatening to consume him. He paced the parched land, his shoulders slumped under the weight of a burden he felt was solely his own. The threat of losing everything, of having to admit defeat, hung heavy in the air. A suffocating presence. Sarah, however, refused to let him succumb to despair. Her past had taught her resilience, and she saw in Elias not just a husband, but a man worthy of fighting for. She proposed a desperate plan, to dig a new well, deeper than any they had attempted before, relying on an old, half-forgotten map Elias's father had once drawn, hinting at an underground spring. It was a monumental task, requiring endless hours of back-breaking labor under the scorching sun. But Sarah worked tirelessly beside him, her hands, once the source of her shame, now tools of their shared salvation. She brought him water, wiped the sweat from his brow, and offered words of encouragement when his spirit flagged. Her unwavering resolve became his anchor, pulling him back from the brink of defeat. During these arduous days, confronting their deepest fears and insecurities, their bond solidified with an undeniable strength. The physical exhaustion brought forth raw honesty, and they spoke of their fears, their pasts, and their quiet hopes for the future. Elias, witnessing Sarah's fierce determination and unconditional support, saw her not as a woman he had married, out of convenience, but as his true partner, his equal in every sense. He saw beyond the scars, recognizing the beautiful, resilient spirit that resided within her. One sweltering afternoon, as they paused for a moment, covered in dust and sweat, he looked at her, his eyes filled with a tenderness she had never seen before. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice hoarse, "those scars, they tell a story of survival. You're the strongest woman I know. And I love you." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of his heart, a profound acceptance that washed over Sarah like the first rain after a long drought. Their perseverance paid off. After weeks of tireless digging, they struck water, a gush of cool, clear liquid that symbolized not just the salvation of their ranch, but the flourishing of their relationship. The final scene depicts them standing together at the edge of their now revitalized ranch, the green shoots of newly watered grass emerging, a testament to their unwavering faith and hard work. The sun, now a benevolent presence, set in a blaze of glory, casting long, peaceful shadows that were no longer filled with loneliness but with shared hope and a deep sense of belonging. Their union, born from desperation, had blossomed into a partnership built on mutual respect, unwavering love, and the quiet understanding that in the vast, unpredictable expanse of the American West, sometimes the most unexpected connections were the ones that truly brought redemption and a lasting, profound happiness.